So here we've got a little bit of inspiration coming your way, thanks to Meg Jordan. So Meg Jordan has a fabulous career behind her and ahead of her, I'm sure. As the Department Chair of Integrative Health Studies and Somatic Psychology at CIIS. She's a clinical medical anthropologist, an award-winning international health journalist, behavioral medicine specialist, RN, author, and president of Global Medicine Enterprise. As I was preparing the introduction for Meg, I had to cut it off because it just goes on and on and on. All of her accomplishments are absolutely fantastic, and you've lived 3 lives, it seems, already. It's amazing, very impressive.
Maybe schizoid.
Maybe, maybe. So, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Meg Jordan. Thank you.
I'm having a great time here. I really came because I was hoping somebody could help me figure out why my iPhone goes dead within minutes after downloading iOS 7. So that is my goal to really, before I leave. Otherwise, it is very fun to be able to look at ways to marry healthcare and technology. And I just think that that is our future, and that's where things are headed. And how wonderful that, Julie, I want to thank you and Joe Fabiano for your leadership in helping us come here and share this time with all these brilliant folks I've been able to chat with. I am going to talk about human flourishing. And in human flourishing, it's a phrase that we use because it speaks volumes to the integral nature of the phrase, in which we're not just looking at the enhancement of physical health or mental health, but from an integral viewpoint, how are we connected to spirit, to belonging, to community? In what ways do we have to attend to our life so that there is a flourishing, not just a coping? And so I really like to dedicate this time to our incredible individual on the planet, His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama, because when he said that I believe the purpose of life is to be happy, he said that not long after he watched his friends really slaughtered while they were meditating and chanting in monasteries during the Tibetan Holocaust. And if you can actually kind of imagine somebody still saying, I believe the purpose of life is to be happy, after having that kind of an affront in his life, that kind of trauma, this is my role model for what human flourishing is all about. And I do think that in terms of human flourishing, you can, the problem statement that I'm looking at for all of us here is that how do we grow in what we call crazy slow wisdom in a very accelerated world? The accelerated pace at which we all live, the multitasking that I do, the fact that I still text on the freeway before I look around, I can hang my head in shame about it in some ways, and then I think, no, I'm being efficient so that I can answer 5 texts before I go in my house and collapse and try to do 6 other things in my multifactorial day. But at the same time, I've had to look hard and fast for myself personally at what is it going to take for me to do the self-care to keep up the mental and physical and emotional health for myself and my clients. I teach full-time and run departments, and it's a program that's a master's in integrative health. It takes 2 years for students to go through, and they become health coaches, health practitioners. So we look hard and fast at what does it take to help somebody turn around lifestyle, attitudes, factors, belief, everything. Cultivating that kind of crazy slow wisdom, we're going to talk a little bit about what I consider 6 big ideas. As a medical anthropologist, and anthropology is of course the study of culture, on humanity. Medical anthropology is the study of health and disease from each of our societies, cultures around the world, and that impact as well on how people create health and how they also recover from injury or disease or illness. So these ideas come from medical anthropology, but quite a bit from leading edge in neuroscience right now, especially neurophysiology, and a lot from the positive psychology movement, which has been front and center in a lot of the coaching methodology, coaching psychology we use. First big idea I want to introduce you to is neuroplasticity. How many are aware of this idea? Excellent. This is a good group to work with. So that you know, in neuroplasticity, there are 2 different parts to it. There's, of course, making more neurons, the neurogenesis part of it. We never thought that. When I was in 1 year of med school and then my nursing school, we thought that you had a certain number of brain cells and you were born with that number of brain cells and that's what you had. It was dished out. And if you partied too hard and lived a life of debauchery, well, by God, you were losing those brain cells like crazy, right? Very sad. Well, we're here to still tell you that extreme alcoholism and things like that will, of course, make deep grooves in that entire neural network, and so there is loss and wear and tear. But there's also generation of neurons, which is really exciting news. The other new exciting news out of neuroplasticity is the fact that neural networks expand and grow. And they grow because of our use of them. They become like well-worn grooves. So if I have a habit of eating M&Ms every day at 3 o'clock at my desk, I have worn a groove that says, not only is my palate addicted to that sugar and fat at 3 o'clock, but my habit, my little ritual of getting up from my desk and hunting for those M&Ms is a well-worn groove of habitual practice in there. Neuroplasticity research, a lot of this came from actually University California, San Diego, some really good stuff in the last 5 years due to functional neuroimaging. We saw that how do we actually make that new groove? How do we get one neuron to hold hands with another and actually cross that synapse and make a new pathway in the brain? I love this guy, Paul Stamets. He's probably a fan. You're a fan of his too. Yeah. All right, he's a mushroom researcher, a great mycologist. And he has discovered that one mushroom itself in Oregon practically covered a neural mycelium network of 2,500 acres. So this is the power of networks that I just want to impress you with right now, that we have that same power of that network in our brain. It's like a microcosm of the macrocosm that is reflected in nature. These are both pictures of neural networks and mycelial networks. Okay? So we are reflecting within our own human physiology the power of network that is throughout. Now that we're in the 6th great extinction of animals, Paul Stamets says, after every great extinction, what comes back first? Mushrooms. Why? He says because they live off of decaying and dying matter. They have the power to transform death into life. It's extraordinary, extraordinary. So why, as a medical anthropologist, I march off to China to look at incredible formulas from 10 mushroom supplements that have the ability to look at cancer cells in a petri dish. And when we take the red reishi mushroom that grows in the highlands of China and we put that on the tumor cells in the petri dish, it selectively kills the tumor cells and it leaves the living cells alive and well. Amazing, amazing. And they do it through communication. Extraordinary communication, just like you would see in a redwood forest. How many have tromped through redwood forests and actually seen fairy rings, right? So whenever, and this came out of UC Santa Cruz, I love this research, where they took an axe and they actually, bang, hit the redwood tree, and that redwood tree, that great-grandfather redwood tree said, I'm dying, and sent out through its root system to the network all sorts of offspring. It's your time to take over. And that's what the ring of redwood trees is around a redwood tree that has been threatened. So because we work through networks, we need, now this is one more idea here. This is just one neuron and the many different connections it has. So all the options that are open to you. When you hear Deepak Chopra say things like, from an infinite field of potentiality, you can make choices in any direction. This is what he might be talking about. This kind of reminds me of, what? The Tube in London, right? Doesn't it look like the London subway map? Yeah. But it is the map of your hormonal tree.
Oh, really?
One hormone and how it travels metabolically throughout the body. Again, just another network to let you know. We're moving on to our second big idea. We got to cover 6 in 18 minutes. It's like a TED Talk on fire. Mindfulness. This is a very popular word right now, and you know it. It is the embrace of meditation, of knowing that somehow we have to take this crazy triple brain of ours that goes from a reptilian, very reactive, highly reactive brain that's 1.8 million years old that knows how to either fight or flee, up to the mammalian brain, which is in the limbic system, the middle part of the brain. And why do we call it the mammalian brain? Because we finally learned another response than fighting or fleeing. We learned what a dog does. When a dog is threatened by the bigger dog, you've got dogs? That dog lays down, he shows his belly. Here's my belly, you can gut me, I'm a little dog, you're a really big dog. So that second response was other than fighting or fleeing, it was overwhelm and surrender. Pretty interesting. But the crowning achievement of humanity, we think, is this cerebral cortex, which pretty much anatomically developed about 400,000 years ago, back when Homo erectus was trying to move into Homo sapien, 400,000 to 200,000 years ago. It took another 50,000 years for us behaviorally to change. But that is the part of the brain that makes another idea. Doesn't have to fight or flee, doesn't have to overwhelm or surrender, but can go into higher cortex thinking of, well, I've got some other options here. And if I could take 3 deep breaths, I can actually march through the mental mud from here to there. But the time of 3 deep breaths is the actual biochemical, neurophysiological time that it takes to slush through that mental mud to get to the executive function and say, aha, I think I have another option here. I don't have to be in extreme reactivity. I can answer the phone and talk. Reactivity to creativity. All right? This just gives you an idea. When you want to get to your creative best self, that you have to buy yourself that time. Because biochemistry is slower processing than electric or quantum field processing, of course. And to do that, it would be very sweet for you to develop that sense of inner spaciousness. We work with coaching psychology, positive psychology, to create something called spaciousness on the inside, where we have a little bit more time and breath, where we're cultivating the stillness in our life despite our accelerated age. I love a lot of the work that's done out of HeartMath, the Institute of HeartMath, which is in also the Santa Cruz Mountains, and these are some real characters that have been holed up there for over 15 years. I went 15 years ago and interviewed the founder, who was a tobacco farmer from Carolina, a high school dropout. Doc Childry, what a character. And he said, you know, we look at all the wisdom traditions and they all say the heart is the center, the heart's what sees, what after all. So I got these scientists all holed up here figuring it out. And what he found was that the heart's electrobiomagnetic field generates the torus. How many of you used to play with slinkies when you were little kids, right? You take that slinky and you wrap it all the way around. That is the shape of a torus. It's an actual physics configuration. Now, I would love to see an app that takes that torus bioelectric magnetic energy field up, generated by the heart, and can actually measure it in real time, so that you've all had laced within your language things that tell you you can detect somebody's heart space. When you actually walk in a room and go, oh brother, there is like a cold vibe here, or I came up to somebody and, man, cold shoulder, I just felt their energy, I felt like I couldn't approach them. Or instead, you have the world's happiest golden retriever coming up to you. Your heart energy expands. It'll go out 10 feet. It's been measured to be really huge. I think that's what happens for some people in the presence of a loving mentor, that there is a matching of those energy fields and a coherence between them. You don't get there if you're too multitasking and too scared. Epigenetics, our third big idea I want to show you. Perhaps early on, I mean, some of you are real youngsters, so you might have heard epigenetics, but when you had your first biology course, they pretty much said that the DNA is your code of life, your map, your destiny. Wow, it's all turned around now, completely. The sea that your cells swim in determines whether genes are turned on or off. I love this. I love it. I loved it as much as when I heard that research that said, here's the great big ovum, that egg, and here's all the sperm coming in like crazy sperm. Hi, make me, choose me, choose me. And who gets to decide? Well, that ovum just says, I'm opening the door over here to you. You're the one that gets to come in, okay? So these kinds of ideas switch our paradigm around. And the idea that the sea that your cells swim in actually determines whether or not genes are turned on or off At the latest medical conference I went to in functional medicine, this is fascinating, they called type 2 diabetes a normal response of the body. Normal. If you're going to saturate that body with high refined glucose and force it into a posture of sitting, complete inactivity, then a normal response of the body will be insulin resistance, insulin failure, and all sorts of high rising rates. We're even calling now Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Type 3. That's right, because it's the cells that will start to build neurofibrillary tangles and start to increase their beta amyloid plaque. When that happens, it's often done in the environment of high sugar and low oxygen, low aerobics. We're calling all-day sitting now sitting disease. The sitting disease. It's not enough to just say people are sedentary. I hope within 1 year all of you have elevated laptops and a treadmill. I mean, you need it. So DNA is not your destiny, but the things that you introduce to your cells are. Cells get turned on or off. Obviously his did. They say he has a hard time turning off some genes. You know this man. This is X-Man. This was a big study that we looked at in terms of epigenetics too. We found that we could take 2 mice that were twins, and they were all bred to be obese mice. And what we did was take that one mouse, separate them in 2 different living lifestyle components, and these mice were absolutely bred to be obese no matter what. But we changed the lifestyle factors of one and stayed very lean. 4th big idea I want to leave you with is about presence and telomeres. See these little red caps at the end of your chromosomes? This is fascinating new research out of UCSF, Elizabeth Blackburn. I believe she got a Nobel in medicine and physiology for it a few years back. That little red cap on the end of your chromosomes is just like the shoelace plastic tip on your shoelace. It keeps your shoelace from fraying apart. Your chromosomes need that little tip in place. That little tip stays in place really well when your cortisol levels are managed. You can have some excitement, but you gotta have recovery. But it's also finding out where they're managed and kept in place the more time you spend in present time awareness. For instance, if you're somebody who ruminates about the past a lot, you're upset about what happened, you're constantly freaked out about it, you had a fight with your girlfriend, you're ruminating about it over and over and over again, and if you're not doing that, you're worried about the future. What am I going to do next week? Do I have enough on this? Did I do that? Gosh, I didn't even apply for that. You're spending maybe a ratio of 10% in present time awareness and 90% in either end. We found out that that telomere cap will disintegrate, will start to prematurely age and shorten with the less time you spend in present time. Phenomenal research. So all the wisdom traditions that have said, be here now, be here now, be here now. We now have a physiological counterpart for being here now. It destroys our DNA when we are not here now. Whew. That's a huge one. That's a big one to take on. You know, because if I had an app that just said, reminder, oh yeah, thank you. Just even that a few times a day to get me centered once more. To think, wow, how many out of the last 10 thoughts I had, how many were just here enjoying a fall day? Maybe 2 out of 10. Maybe the other 8 out of 10 are, well, if it doesn't rain pretty soon, we're going to have real trouble. They're going to turn off my faucet. They're going to turn my brown love's going to go brown. No, just look at the fact that the trees have managed to turn because we haven't had huge storms. We very often don't have golden red trees here. We usually have a big wind and rainstorm here. We get to be a little bit of New England this week. I get to notice that. Presence, presence. Your DNA will love you for it. The other thing that happens is that DNA gets protected. The more time you spend with eudaimonic values instead of hedonic values. 2 words. Look at daemon inside of eudaimonic. The daemon is the muse, what calls you to a higher purpose, what calls you to a life of significance and meaning. Eudaimonic values are Yeah, I don't have to have that kind of instant gratification pleasure thing right now, because the truth is I'm really committed to this larger purpose, and I have a sense of service and belonging that's calling me right now. The more you can try to make a shift to eudaimonic values and fewer on hedonic values, which really insist on my pleasures need to be satisfied right now, if through shopping, through addiction. These are the ones that kind of go to addiction levels. I need my chocolate right now. I need to go online right now at LL Bean and buy that new. I need that right now. Watch out for those. Yes?
Aren't there some traditions which combine them?
Yes, there are, and they do it well too. We haven't quite done the well thing here yet. Bali is one traditional society that combines both the sensual, beautiful, instant gratification pleasure with a sense of higher purpose, belonging, and service. Travel to Bali and you'll experience that there. But really, what sustains life is what we're going after. Fifth big idea is social belonging. Wow, lots of incredible research on social belonging right now that has looked at some of it from medical anthropology. I want you all to think of who you could call at 3 in the morning if you were really stuck on the freeway, AAA or wasn't available, there were no tow trucks, you were in an area you considered unsafe. Who could you call at 3 in the morning? So medical anthropology says that based on how our neurophysiology and neuroendocrine systems evolved 400 to 200,000 years ago, we need to be in collections of no less than 9. About 9 to 12 is the right number of individuals that we need to be on in order for our entire neurophysiology, neuroendocrine system, cardiovascular system to function well. If we are socially isolated in numbers less than that, we don't have the same physiological response to health and well-being and flourishing. So groups of 9 to 18 in high stress times are needed. Very interesting data, right? Do you have at least 2 or 3 people you could call at 2 in the morning? Could you, within 1 year, build that to 9 people? We used to have this in traditional societies. We live with such isolation right now. It's amazing. Some of this also comes out of attachment theory. Attachment theory feeds us in terms of social belonging. We pull a lot from this. I'm not going to go into it now. I'm just letting you know what some of the underpinning research is that works at this. I love the work done by Gabor Mate in his book on hungry ghosts, in the realm of hungry ghosts. He also looked at the 9 months of gestation to years 0 to 6. Who were your caretakers? How much love and support was there? Was there consistency? Was there safety? The less there was, the more mental distress and addiction, problems with dual diagnosis. He's charted this by being in the trenches. I lived in Vancouver, British Columbia for 3 years, from 03 to 06, knew Gabor up there, would walk those streets with him that could be seen from a satellite of such despair and incredible addiction, people shooting up heroin on the street, falling over. There's this, it was their shame during the Olympics. They tried to cordon off the streets on Hastings. And it's a major area of blight and violence and drug addiction. And he walked those streets as a doctor looking at what was the foundational things that put people into this horrible state of affairs. And he saw it really was this kind of, that there was no attachment. Then they wandered the rest of their life, and no attachment in the early years, they wandered the rest of their life in this very hungry role. Can it be fixed? Absolutely. You can come into social belonging, mentorship, positivity, great relationships, self-care, enhanced self-care. There's ways to turn it around. My other favorite researcher is social psychologist and sociologist Robert Putnam, who analyzed how are we in societies right now? Are we bowling alone? We used to have civic groups, bowling groups, Little League, Cub Scouts, everything else. Very easy ways to form groups of this 9 to 18. Wow, with everybody working home, alone, isolated, in cars, individual startups. We aren't joiners like you used to be. But joining is an actual facet of human behavior that we have to attend to. We have a lot more selfies than selectees. And I don't know what I was thinking when I made that slide. We're just going to go right over that. Makes sense to me. Nature immersion. This is the sixth big idea, and I'm leaving it to my wonderful colleague Craig, because this is his forte as an eco-psychologist. But I did go to give a presentation in China that was at the Kyoto Protocol building. It was called Gaia Medicine, where we got together with Japanese, Chinese researchers from around the world that looked at the fact that we're spending very little time in the great outdoors. Less than 5% was an estimate in 2008 from the National Academy of Sciences. That's astounding to me as a little kid who grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, and all we were told was, get out of this house till it's dark, get out of here. So how are we working with this? Our loss of natural habitat not only affects all the animal and biosphere, but affects us tremendously. One of my favorite writers on this, of course, Richard Louv, Last Child in the Woods. Powerful book that awakened many of us to the fact that the less time we spend in a natural terrain, how damaging it is to physical and emotional, mental well-being. We need to play in the dirt for our immune system, and the less we play in the dirt, the higher rates we see of asthma and even childhood leukemia. Our immune system, we're born with an immature immune system, and it requires robust training, just like working with a personal trainer in our first few years of life. The more we play in the digital world, the more we see, of course, the obesity rates, the despair, the social isolation. It's weird to ask tech to help us fix this, but tech needs to help us fix this. One of the most astounding pieces of research were the kids that's 6 to 9 years old who spend quite a bit of time, I think this was over 4 hours a day, 4 hours a day with a digital device. Didn't matter if it was a screen, TV, video, phone. Start to lose one of the founding capacities of human beings, and that is the ability to recognize human emotion. And when you are, by the time you're 6 to 9 years old and you have lost the ability to know if somebody is mad, bitter, angry, upset, that's a fundamental human right. This is alarming. This has got to stop. 5? Thank you. I'm going to end probably a little sooner. We found that in hospitals, all we have to do, if we can't put somebody next to a window so that they can be near nature and look out at the tree, we're finding that that actually reduces their hospital stay. It accelerates wound recovery. It accelerates recovery post-operatively. But if we don't have them next to a window, if we just hang a picture. Right now, I could go around and swab each one of your mouths and get some IgA, immunoglobulin A, and look at your cortisol levels from just staring at a nature picture. Your cortisol levels will drop a little bit, and your IgA, immunoglobulin A, will rise a little bit. It's temporary, but it will happen. So we found just putting a beautiful picture in a hospital room helps all that. So to recap a little bit, 6 big ideas to humanly flourish, to take a look at that equation that we've been working with today on how do we reduce stress, how do we decrease the likelihood of mental disorders, gun violence, suicide, ideation, everything else. I decided I was going to come to the other side of the equation and look at how do we ramp up salutogenesis, a word that we're looking at in health promotion research. Salute, health, genesis, creation, the creation of health. How do we actually ramp up and amplify that end of the equation? And the things that I know that work are feeding people with the idea that, yes, you can create new habits. It's one of the best things that we've learned as human beings with psychology is that I can stop a runaway, bad, destructive thought in its tracks. I can stop it in its tracks, and I can choose another option. I mean, that we've really just figured out in the last 20 years neurophysiologically. Pretty amazing that we got this far, this long without that. Mindfulness, yes, how do we just say, I gotta put the brakes on and cultivate some inner stillness right now. Epigenetics, how do I recognize the fact that my choices are actually determining my genetic code and my destiny, my longevity, everything else. We're 51st in the world right now, the US, in terms of overall longevity, after spending $1.6 trillion on our health care. For 30 years, our country has gotten more obese, more chronic disease, more teenage suicides, more rates of depression climbing for the last 30 years. So I'm telling you, healthcare doesn't have all the answers. And when we have to look at other fields, technology, business, coaching, strategic plans, to borrow from and to say, help us turn around this juggernaut of poor chronic disease. Ramp that up to 6 to 9 individuals, it will have an effect on your health, and immersing yourself in the natural world. Hope you can do it sometime this weekend even. And if this is your normal day, because I've been on this flight plenty of times. I have. I love Larry David. He's just crazy. But look at the fact that, you know, sometimes there are certain pleasures that are going to work in your life really well, just like they worked for this lady in Cuba. You know, that cigar is part of her life. And I have a feeling that she has an epigenetics of happiness and joy and belonging between her colors and her situation there that can actually almost reverse the ill effects of her weekly cigar or daily cigar. You have to do what you love. Have you taken the time to figure that out? This kid did. Absolutely did. I have a feeling this is how swine flu got started. That's it. Thank you very much.